Hi, I'm Zoe Starr, and welcome to my show, Paranormal Extraction. Today, we have on my favorite conspiracy theory, Dyatlov Pass. I am so excited to do this today with Sean Straney. Now, he's a historian, okay, and this guy is absolutely amazing. So, the truth be told by somebody who really knows. Okay, did you know in 1959, 9 Soviet hikers, skiers on the trek of a lifetime perished in the Ural Mountains? They made camp during the snowy conditions. And what happens to this day, still somewhat, is a supernatural mystery. My favorite. And so here we are. We're going to get the truth from Sean. I am so excited about my favorite conspiracy theory. Sean, oh my God, you are such a great historian. And I love this because there's so many things out there that are fact driven on Dyatlov Pass. And I think we got it, from your research and our discussion. So I'm going to start off with, okay, in the beginning, I talked about these in 1959, these 9 Soviet hikers, skiers, okay, that were well experienced, okay, went to the pass of the Ural Mountains, okay. So let's have you take it from there, okay. So they went there, but I know there was a guy that was a huge lead in this, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But anyways, so tell us about this conspiracy theory.
Well, since we're talking about a Russian conspiracy, let me start with Привет, как which is how are you?
Oh, you're so smart.
Well, I'm learning Russian. So the leader of this group is what the pass is named for, and where they actually had their tent was outside of the pass. The pass actually sits between Holacho Mountain, which is also known as Dead Mountain, and Otorten Mountain, which was their destination. Their destination was to, go up to the peak of Otorten Mountain.
Yeah, now I know it was like super, just to let everyone know. I mean, this is pure snow. This is a place that no one goes. So you have to be.
This is the Ural Mountains, and it's like the gateway. It's on the southern part of Siberia. It's the gateway into Siberia. The only regular inhabitants of the area that they were in were the Mansi tribes that have lived there forever. Very related to our Eskimos in Alaska.
Right.
And they herd reindeer, and they still live in semi-nomadic tribes and everything. This is not an area that people choose to live in.
Right.
So his name was Igor Dyatlov, and he was the leader. He was a very, very experienced hiker. They departed in January, I believe it was, what was it? It was January 24th. They went from Sverdlovsk. They were part of the most prestigious mountain climbing and hiking group at the Ural Polytechnic Institute in Sverdlovsk.
Yeah, they were, but let's just tell everyone they were skiing over there because of the snow. It wasn't a hike. They had on skis.
Oh yeah, they cross country.
Right.
But they were all very experienced. They were a prestigious group. They went they did these hikes in the summer, in the winter, and they had actually had faced severe conditions such as sudden storms before, and it was all because of Igor Dyatlov's leadership and his ability as an outdoorsman, as a mountaineer, as a skier, that they survived some close calls on previous excursions into the Ural Mountains. So this was not a group that was just going out for a hike and were totally unprepared for what possible conditions they might face.
Right.
They were very experienced and very prestigious in what they did. So they took a bus up to what's called Sector 41, which was a logging camp.
Right.
At that logging camp, they cross-country skied towards Torton Mountain, which was their goal. They passed an abandoned geological site that was at one point a mining site. And they were just to the east of Holachel Mountain. And a storm started moving in, which is very common. You get these snow squalls up in that area. And they decided not to proceed further. They decided to set up camp, partially sheltered by Holachel Mountain, or Dead Mountain, as it's called. Holachel is actually a Mansi word.
Yeah, doesn't it mean like Dead Man's Mountain or something?
It just means Dead Mountain.
Okay, right. Okay. Yeah, I've been looking into this for quite some time.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Eric von Daniken tried to translate it as the mountain of death. Do not go there, and it doesn't mean that at all. It's just Dead Mountain because there's once you get past a certain altitude on that mountain, there's no life. It's like when you go to the Rockies and you pass the timberline and there's nothing growing but lichens on rocks. That's all it is.
Yeah.
So they departed. They took a bus to Sector 41, got on their skis, and began cross-country skiing toward their destination.
Right.
They were due to return February 13th. They did not return on February 13th to the university, but nobody really worried at that point because they knew about severe weather conditions. But they also knew that if anybody was going to survive in harsh conditions, it was this group of mountaineers and hikers. By February 16th, they started getting worried because now it was 3 days past. And by February 20th, it was now a full week past their expected return date. And that's when family members and other students started contacting authorities.
Okay, now wait a second. We're missing a piece here. One of the guys, the most experienced hiker, wasn't it Dyatlov, that went back to camp?
No, it was a guy named Uridan.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Because he had partially sprained his ankle.
Yeah.
And actually, about the time that they got to the abandoned mining site, he could not go any further.
Right. So he turned around and went back. So
he turned around and went back early.
Yeah, and the 8 others went there, and then they in a safe area, and they set up
9 others.
Oh, okay, 9 others, and then they set up camp in a safe place. Okay, and I'm correct on that, right?
Yes.
Okay, and
they
then
purposely moved to the leeward side of Holachel Mountain, or Dead Mountain, to have some shelter from incoming storms that the mountain would provide.
Right. So they set up this camp, okay, or whatever you want, and they pitched their tents, and they did, all their stuff to prepare for their sleepover there. And then, okay, they were missing, and of course, they went back to find them. But why were they missing? Okay, is what we're going to talk about. which is bizarre. Okay. So when they arrived, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, um, to find them, they actually found the first thing they found was the tent was cut from the inside
That's correct.
to
And they didn't discover that the tent had been cut from the inside until they actually had professionals examine the fibers under a microscope.
oh, okay, really?
Yeah, and they determined, number one, that the fabric was not torn, it was deliberately cut by a knife. And number two, the way the punctures were that started the cuts, they were punctured from the inside out.
Okay.
So here you've got these experienced hikers, and they cut holes in the sides of their tent
Yeah.
to escape,
Right.
to get out.
Right. So,
And the preliminary theory, actually, before they started doing a lot of the forensic investigation with microscopes and everything else, was a gale force wind toward the hikers away from their tent.
you,
But that didn't add up, because inside the tent, all their ski boots were neatly lined up as they were getting ready to call it a day.
right.
Uh, they also found a opened container of cocoa that it looked like somebody was getting to heat up on their stove.
Mm-hmm.
The cooking stove, the portable cooking stove, had not been assembled but was placed in the center of the tent. They were getting ready to eat. And there was also a cloth napkin with freshly cut ham slices laid out on it.
Oh my God. See, and they don't, any of the shows you watch, they don't talk about any of the stuff we're talking about right now. I mean, they just say cut out tent. They don't mention the ski boots. They don't mention what you're mentioning, and, so this is like we're getting into some serious stuff here.
Well, they also show the picture of the collapsed tent,
Yeah.
and the tent was not collapsed when the first people got up there. What happened was the tent collapsed later because they couldn't get into the front because it was snowbound. And one of the guys looking for the hikers, one of the first guys that got up there, he took an ice axe and he cut uh, the upslope side of the tent to get inside to see if the hikers were in there. There was a snowstorm that night, and because of the cuts on the downslope side that the hikers made escaping the tent, and the cut that he made to get inside the tent finally collapsed the next day.
Wow. Okay. So then he went out looking around for these.
Right. So they started looking for the bodies, and they found two within a couple days. Both the bodies had they were in various states of dress. In other words, one had just his T-shirt on, a long sleeve, thermal T-shirt. I should say, thermal underwear, not a T-shirt. He had long sleeve thermal underwear on, uh, but and a pair of pants, but nothing else, except for socks. No shoes. The other guy they found, he was face up. They believe birds may have pecked out his eyes. They
Right.
didn't find any evidence of foul play, but they believe birds may have pecked out his eyes. Uh, but he was frozen in the snow, and his the right leg of his pants were shredded and missing.
Yeah.
But
It's
the remaining part of the right leg of his pants was obviously shredded. And when they did forensic investigation on that, they could not determine what could have shredded his pants. And his right leg was bent underneath him in a funny, awkward position.
yeah. Yeah.
So the first ones that they ended up finding, they found the first five. And the first five they all determined had died of hypothermia, but all five were in these various states of dress. And what they believe is that they set up their tent, they were setting up the stove, they were getting ready to eat, getting ready to have a meal and settle in. And they were also in the process of changing out of partially wet clothes into some dry clothes to settle in for the evening. And that accounts for the period, the various states of dress and undress. And one of the theories is always, well, they started having hypothermia, they started getting delusional because blood flow to the brain decreases when you start getting into deep hypothermia, and you start, hallucinating and stuff like that. But that never added up
Right.
because
Well, of course not, because, they're in a tent and it's, cut out from the inside. They're not dressed. Okay. And of course, you're going to get hypothermia, right? I mean, if you're running
well,
out in your socks and a shirt or a pair of thermal underwear, of course, you're going to get hypothermia.
now they say you start to discard clothes because you think you're warm, but they
Oh,
never found discarded clothes between the tent and where they found the various bodies.
right.
So the hypothermia hallucination doesn't add up. Makes no sense. In fact, what's interesting is when they started examining the cuts on the downslope side of the tent, there was another slit, another hole. It wasn't a full hole that somebody could get out of, but uh, there was a coat partially pulled through the hole. So somebody, one of the hikers, cut back into the tent and tried to grab their fur jacket
Oh,
to
wow.
take with them, but it got stuck in the hole and they
Wow.
abandoned it.
Okay. So they're missing a ton of information already. Okay. All right. So now we're looking at another 7 hikers, right? They found the two, okay, which
Well,
is
they found two, and then they later found three others in between the tent and where they found the first two bodies.
right.
Now this is where it gets interesting.
Yeah.
Uh,
Weird
Rust,
and freaky.
Rustic Slobodin. He was also found with his right leg bent beneath him and discoloration on his forehead and towards the top of his skull, like before he had died, before he had succumbed to exposure and hypothermia. He had suffered some kind of major blunt force trauma to the front of his head. And the front of his head was bruised and discolored, and blood had time to settle in there. So he was not, it wasn't something that happened after he died. It was
Right.
something that happened to him while he was alive.
Right.
Zaneta Kolmogorova
I know they're
was
hard to
also,
they're hard to expound I mean say, their names for me anyways. Yeah.
well, they are, and she was found nearby also with a twisted leg.
Yeah, this is the gross one,
Uh,
right?
and both Rustic and Zenaida were facing where they had fell towards the tent. So both of them were trying to get back to the tent when whatever happened to them caused them to fall and finally succumb to exposure, hypothermia, laying in the snow.
Right.
Both of them, when they found them and they dug in the snow, they had a little cavity around their mouths that was crusted over with ice, which indicated that when they fell in the snow, they were still breathing. And their warm breath had partially melted the snow, created that pocket, and then it recrusted as it froze over.
Um, Now is this the gross one? These aren't the gross ones. I
Oh
know
no,
there's
they weren't found till a month later.
yeah, okay.
So
So
the first five they determined died of hypothermia. Now the person that was leading the investigation was his name was Templov. He was the original investigator, and he was not coming to any conclusions. He was just gathering evidence, gathering evidence. They had no answers for the parents. They had no answers for the other students at the university, and parents and their friends are kind of getting impatient. Well, of course, at that time in the Soviet Union, communism is perfect. They don't have unanswered questions. So he was replaced by another prosecutor or investigator named Lev Ivanov. And it was Ivanov that started shutting down a lot of the
Okay,
evidence.
so we got this new guy. What was his name?
Lev Ivanov.
Okay, all right. So he went in and was investigating. Now, first of all, they found the other two bodies. We're missing a couple there. So did he come in and then he found them after?
No, he just took over the original investigation, of which five bodies have been discovered so far at this point.
Oh, okay, okay.
It's now like mid-March 1959. But because of the blunt force trauma to Rustic's forehead, the condition they found Zenaida in, what they wanted to do was they said, we're going to have the funeral and bury the bodies close to where they were found because, the parents were outraged. What are they trying to cover up? Because nobody's going to go up into the Ural Mountains just to attend a funeral.
Okay, so tell me about the rest of the hikers. When did they find them?
Well, just real quickly, the parents won their case. They were brought back to Sverdlovsk. They had closed casket funerals, refused to have open casket funerals. So now it's late March, and they find the other four bodies, and these are the ones that are really super creepy. Three of them were close by a running stream, and then the fourth one was found nearby, and his body was in the worst condition, and that was Sasha Zolotaryov. And Sasha Zolotaryov, the right side of his chest, he had fractured ribs, he had hemorrhaging. It was like he had received some kind of severe blunt trauma to the right side of his chest.
Right.
The hemorrhaging indicates that this trauma happened while he was alive and blood was starting to pool in that area. And it looked like he had internal bleeding or hemorrhaging for several hours before he died.
Okay, yeah.
The other three that were found by the stream, one of them had similar blunt force trauma to their head. I believe it was to the left side. Their skull was actually fractured, and they were getting hemorrhaging and fluid buildup, pressuring the brain on the skull.
Right.
Again, this happened while they were alive, and they suffered through this injury for a while before they finally succumbed to hypothermia.
Yeah. Okay, so we have two more.
So these last four bodies they found, because three of them were together near the stream bed. Sasha was off by himself a little bit.
Okay.
I think like 10 meters away. These four bodies, one of them was missing their tongue, and I'm not going to.
Yeah, this is the gross one, right?
He was missing his tongue, and he had internal bleeding around the area of his liver and his kidneys. Again, blunt force trauma, and was alive when it happened because they found all the evidence of the internal bleeding. These four bodies, they also found when they did toxicology that they had radioactive isotope of potassium-40 in their bodies, which they could not account for.
Right. This is nuts. Yeah.
I mean, potassium, we do have potassium in our bodies, and we do have trace amounts of potassium-40, but this was high enough levels
Yes.
that it actually set off a Geiger-Müller device,
Oh my
which
God.
they said, oh my God, there's radiation coming from somewhere.
Yeah.
So they did the further testing, and they had extremely high levels of potassium, the radioisotope potassium 40, in their bodies.
Yeah.
Unusually high compared to just normal trace amounts.
Right. Yeah.
They cannot account for it.
Of
To this
course.
day, to this day, nobody can scientifically explain why they would have had these elevated levels of potassium 40. It couldn't even be accounted for if they lived off absolutely nothing but bananas for a month
Which
straight.
is, this is crazy though, because I know they did another investigation. They opened it up about 3 years ago, and they shut it down again. It's just like so ridiculous. Okay, so we have two more, right? Bodies.
No, that's the 9.
Okay, that's the 9.
The first
Okay,
5 died hypothermia.
right.
And actually, Igor Dyatlov was in that second 4. And he had also had blunt force trauma to his organs and had been internally bleeding, hemorrhaging for some time before he died.
Right. Okay. So the theories on this are so ridiculous. Okay. Well, they're not,
Now,
they have
one,
several.
one
One,
other quick thing.
yeah.
One other quick thing is that they did have their knives with them. And when they found these last 4 down by the stream, they apparently had cut birch and spruce branches and tried to make bedding to insulate
Oh
themselves.
my God.
They were aware they were not suffering from hypothermia and
Or
hallucination
delusional.
and
Right.
everything. Yeah,
Right.
they were not delusional.
Right. So we have all this strange stuff going on. And okay, they shut it down, and they said they just all died again after their second opening of the case, because there's so much, which is only what, 2 or 3 years ago. Okay, and we're looking from 1959, and all of a sudden, because all these people are going, what? No, this isn't right. So they open it and then they close it again. It's just stupid. It's ridiculous. Okay, so
Well, the outside world did not even know about this until the 1990s because, we weren't allowed to go over and examine, Soviet or Russian archives. It wasn't until Gorbachev, had his glasnost, his
right.
openness, he was allowing American historians to get into Russian archives, and a lot of narratives changed. The Cuban Missile Crisis, a lot of stuff. But anyways, not to get too far off track. And even then, this was kind of like, the way Lev Ivanov was writing up his reports, it was like, a bunch of hikers had a tragic misfortune in the mountains. They died of exposure. There's nothing to this.
Yeah, they said it was an avalanche that came down. Okay. Um, and
The gust of wind one is almost comical because if a gale force gust of wind was able to blow bodies away from the tent, it should have blown all the ski boots over and outside the tent too. But the ski boots were all lined up.
yeah.
The skis were, stuck
Yeah.
outside nearby. The skis weren't blown over or knocked down. But
Yeah.
Ivanov did everything he could to cover this up, and it's believed he was under orders from the KGB. Basically, no, we're not going to have a conspiracy theory. We're not going to. You
Right.
shut down all this information.
Yes, they
turn
did.
it over to us, and we'll lock it up and lock it away. It'll never be seen again about the potassium 40 levels, about this. But the forensic pathologists were the ones that, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, because they were still alive in the 1980s, 1990s, they started opening up about their discoveries when they investigated this incident.
Mm-hmm.
And Templov himself also, he came out and specifically said, I was replaced because I wanted to investigate this honestly. I did not want to come to conclusions, and they said, no, we need to close this up. We need closure on this. And they replaced him with Ivanov. And then the
Yeah.
KGB told Ivanov what to say.
Okay, so we have several theories on this. Okay, so so let's go beyond the stupid, well, it's not stupid, the scientific research on this. That's very important, and they don't talk about it. But okay, so they're saying everything about that tribe that's there killed them, to Bigfoot or the abominable snowman.
Well,
They're talking
the
about
man,
they're talking about
the Mansi didn't do it, and they originally thought that because there were a set of tracks of a group of Mansi leading their reindeer uh, approximately 30 kilometers from where the hikers were found. They
right.
never went near where the hikers had set up their tent. And Mansi are not hostile by nature. They're actually the type that if they meet strangers, they will invite you in to have something to eat, and everything. They're very friendly, very open society.
Mm-hmm.
Even their warriors and their hunters are this way. They're some of the most they're the least hostile people you would want to meet.
Right. Yeah, right. So we're moving on to the Bigfoot theory. Okay.
Well,
So
in that part of Russia, to the best of my knowledge, there has never been any kind of Yeti or Bigfoot sightings. They usually occur further west uh, and a little bit south. There's actually quite a few that have occurred near Lake Baikal. Uh,
but
but
not in that area.
but
So
what is interesting in that area, and the Mansi have a lot of legends about it, and I mean, if you're willing to go out in harsh conditions, there are people that have gone out and found these. They call them the cauldrons because there's these metal domes that look like upside down cauldrons in the nearby lowland swamps.
wow.
Nobody knows what they are. Nobody knows where they came from. They're ancient. The
Wow.
Mansi the Mansi say that these cauldrons, as they call them, were there long before they inhabited the area.
Wow. Okay. And they don't know what these things are. So maybe they're a cryptid or some type of.
No idea what they are other than they're metal and they look like upside down cauldrons or domes. There was a Western expedition that went and found some of these domes and were going to examine them. They camped out overnight and all of them got very, very sick with nausea and flu-like symptoms overnight. They ended up leaving and saying, "Yeah, we're not coming back."
Right. Okay. So we're moving on to they thought it was some kind of testing ground for Russia with some type of missiles or something from that
There,
was.
there was a weather satellite that was visible in the area on February 1st, but it was nothing more than a weather satellite launch. And they hadn't quite made it up there by February 1st. The hikers were still about a day out. Although they may have seen it, they may have seen, the lights in the sky from the rocket launch and everything. They hadn't set up camp yet. So that
Okay.
wasn't something that frightened them.
Okay. So, in your opinion, uh, what do you think happened here, Sean, by all of your research? I mean, this is nuts, and there's all kinds of weird theories like UFOs and
First thing
aliens.
that first thing to take into consideration is that they had the stove, their portable stove out. They hadn't assembled it yet, and they were starting to prepare food for cooking. That immediately they abandoned that. So they weren't even in any kind of state of mind where they might be worried, that they might be scared, but something apparently shocked them enough that they didn't even go out. Some went out the entrance of the tent. They did find, the frozen footprints, but several of them just cut open the downslope side of the tent and left.
Yeah, so I
And
mean,
then,
yeah, this
and then,
is
and then two of them tried to come back to the tent, and that was Rustic Slobodin and Zenaida Kolmogorova,
right. Okay.
because they were found face down with their heads pointing toward the tent. They were trying to get back to the tent.
Right. So what I'm asking at this point that we're at is, what is your theory or consensus of happened to them? I mean,
I
is
don't.
is
I
there
really
is
do.
there one?
I don't know what happened to them, but the other intriguing part, besides how they left the tent, they rushed out of the tent without their clothes, uh, is all the blunt force trauma on various bodies, and that some of them were found with their legs twisted. Now, if you trip and fall, you might, twist an ankle or something like that. But the way they found Zenaida Kolmogorova and trying to remember the other
Yeah, I
gal,
know
the
what
way
you
they
said.
the way
Yeah.
they found them, and Sasha Zolotaria, who was one of the last four that also had the radioisotope potassium 40, it looks more like they had been dropped from a height and landed on their leg wrong, and it totally bent it backwards.
Wow. So we are looking at possible UFO experience.
And that is very possible.
Okay.
The blunt force trauma to the head, to the rib cages on some of the bodies could have been from falling from a great height, and that's
Okay.
where they landed.
Right. So the consensus would be, because there's no other explanation, you've already ruled out all of those, would be that they saw aliens, UAPs, UFOs, or one that had done something. Okay. If they're dropped, there's no other explanation. Um, I mean,
Now, if they saw something in the sky, and at least one of them was outside the tent whenever this event began, because they found an axe and a saw right outside the door, and another axe not too far away. So somebody was getting ready to go out and start gathering wood,
yeah.
is what the evidence looks like. Even if they saw something in the sky, being that these were experienced outdoorsmen and everything, more than likely the response would have been, and this is common sense, hey guys, everybody come out and look at this. There's a strange light in the sky, and they all would have came out and looked at it. Oh no, something happened almost instantaneously that terrified all nine of them. Terrified them.
Okay. So
Uh,
it's not just,
Something could have landed next to their, close to their tent,
yeah.
and terrified them. And they were like, oh hell no, I'm getting out of here. Slash open the tent, cut these holes, get out. They
Okay.
all ran off down slope of the tent.
Yeah.
So they
And
were,
then, right. So then something picked them up and dropped them. Okay. And, when they dropped, they got all of these different things. Which, the radio active, stuff they found within the two hikers would suggest that they also,
the last four
yeah,
hikers
okay, the
at the
last
elevated.
would suggest that happened within the craft, because a lot of people that have done research, of course, I do a lot of, interviews on these people, that that's has happened to them, Sean.
Well, there's only two ways that they could have had the elevated levels of potassium 40. Number one, they either drank a bottle loaded with potassium for you, like you do when you drink barium before you have a heart exam,
It's
right?
ridiculous. It's
But
ridiculous.
none of them had bottles of potassium 40 in solution. The other way is they were exposed to some kind of penetrating radiation that
Yes.
created those isotopes. Just like if steel inside nuclear reactors eventually becomes radioactive cobalt and nickel
That's why
because of
they
the
thought,
danger from the radiation.
right, that's why they thought that um, that had to do with it. Okay, so if that had to do with it, then the government had to be involved. Okay, so we're looking at what the government's going to throw them up in the air and crash them down on the ground and make them scared. I mean, none of that makes any sense. It's got to be,
Exactly.
it's got to be
And
UFOs and aliens then.
and let's say they went crazy, and one guy whacked another guy in the forehead, causing the blunt force trauma and the
Yeah,
bruising. You would have evidence of what he was whacked with. You would say, "Oh, this was caused by a branch. We can see the blunt force trauma that would indicate a branch. It
gee,
indicates
that's
a
really
shovel."
hard to shut this down. Okay,
And
yeah, exactly.
and this was just blunt force trauma, like that's where he landed with all of his body weight.
Right. So the consensus is the only thing that I can think of is I'm going to say it again, aliens or UFOs. Now, I've never heard in all of my interviews anything like this. Okay. So it must have been some malevolent race of extraterrestrials.
Well, think about like when we find the cattle mutilations.
Yeah.
The cows we always know have been dropped from a great height to the location they're found at.
Okay. So it's the same species
They
that,
they may have thought we were so primitive we were nothing more than animals when they first made contact with us. Who knows? Who knows? But
wow, Sean, is there anything else?
like I said, all the evidence points to
Oh,
something terrified them. They got their injuries from being dropped and landing with their body weight, not by being hit by something or anything like that. And then, of course, you have the last four that were found, and they were farther than anybody else. They were hiding from something, and they had elevated levels of, the
that's
radioisotope,
that
radioactive
all
potassium 40.
that all goes to extraterrestrials, okay? That all points in that direction. That's
It
right
does.
now
I agree.
with everything that you're speaking about, that is what my conclusion is. And you agree.
I do agree. What is it that Sherlock Holmes always said? Once you rule out the impossible, whatever's left, no matter how improbable, has to be the answer. So we've ruled out that they were delusional from hypothermia. We
Yeah.
ruled out a gale force wind blowing them away from the tent. We've ruled out an attack by the Mansi. We've ruled out everything except for they may have been picked up by UFOs, and they were just basically dropped out of the craft when the aliens were done with them.
God damn, that's so scary. Well, okay, we got to shut this down. So for Dyatlov Pass, and what our consensus is. So I think that's it. I mean, that's what we wanted to talk about. And that gives everyone our theory, okay? Which is what you talked about is all covered up in any video you see or anything that you watch about history on these people. They're missing so much that you've talked about. So my conclusion, and I'm going to say this, is extraterrestrials You agree, and that's awesome. I appreciate all this, Sean, because people want to know. Thank you.
Yeah, and there is a lot of evidence that you don't see in the TV shows, the segments, and
No.
everything. I actually read a very very good book where this was researched in 2012, and he wrote a book with all the evidence, and also wrote a lot about Lev Ivanov and his role in covering up the facts because, well, the Communist Party in 1959 were perfect. We don't make mistakes. Nobody can outsmart us. It was more of an ego thing than anything.
Yeah.
And, the KGB's role in saying, this is what you're going to say the official causes of death are, and that's it.
Yep.
And we're seizing all the evidence.
Yep. So it's a cover up. All right. Okay. Well, I appreciate you being on the show today and getting things straight. Okay. And I always love you coming on here and speaking about this. I know you're going to be on a show again with yet another, I mean, you're really good at this stuff, Sean. I mean, it's amazing how intelligent you are. So I hate to shut you down, but we keep, the people interested without going too far, for them to watch. So I want to say thank you so much. And
well, thank you for having me.
I always love it. And we're going to be doing another show. Of course, I'll let everyone know what that one is, which is very interesting. And I think that's next month you're coming on. Anyways, I just want to say thank you so much again. You're incredibly smart. If anyone wants to get a hold of you, they can get a hold of you, Sean Straney on Facebook. And if you have any questions, contact me or Sean. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay. Thanks, Sean.